So this is how you check in on your Google ads and your campaigns every day, and you're going to check for negative keywords. So here is the amount of clicks, to the conversions. This is the cost per conversion and the total spent for yesterday. And so you can change the date up here. And so you're gonna look at yesterday because it's a full day. But let's say it's a Monday, you're going to be looking at Friday through Sunday because you weren't checking on the weekends. So you can change that there, but usually we're going to look at yesterday. And over here you have all your campaigns. So we're going to look at Brivy brand first, and then you're going to click on keywords, then you're going to click on search terms. You're going to read through all of those, and you'll learn after doing this a little bit what's a negative keyword and what's a good keyword. So all of these look pretty good. And then we're going to look at lead generation. And so here's paid at closing, which that should be a negative keyword because that's not really a brevity thing. So you're going to click this little checkbox, click add as a negative keyword, campaign. Then you're going to surround the part that you want to be negative in quotes. And then click save. And then keep scrolling through and go to the next campaign. In the mornings is social listening, and so here is Facebook Ad Manager. And so you're going to want to click on lead forms because that's the campaign that we're working with. So these are all the different ad sets. And so you click on an ad set, and then if you click on edit in one of the specific ads, there's this little box here, and you can click on that and open the comments in a new tab. And then I usually go straight to the next ad set and then open up into a new tab. I do this for all the ads before I actually click into any of them because it's a little bit more direct and it saves time. Okay, so go to the first Facebook post, and these are all the different posts that are in this ad set. And so I just scroll through, just click through, and you can see here that some of them are hidden, and that might be because they're spam or because they carry on this really long conversation, and so that doesn't really make sense. Or Instagram ad. You can see on all of these I've either liked it as brevity or I've commented onto it. So if someone comments their email like this, usually I'll message them and just say, hey, thanks for sending us your email. What's a good phone number for you? Because we're trying to kind of complete their contact. People comment all the time, I would like to receive information, or I would love information. And so I'll like it and then comment. If someone says how or they're asking about the ad, this is usually a pretty good thing to say. I'll copy and paste this into the handbook for you so you can have it. If they ask about the team, this is something else you can say. Sometimes people will comment something sassy, so you can delete that. If it's sort of ambiguous, I leave it alone because sometimes people will be like, you're deleting all of the comments that are negative. I'll usually just go into Facebook as well and look at notifications because sometimes they don't show up. So this person commented on Brittany's video, so I'll go straight to that and look at it. Yeah, so you can see info please. So I'll say, I'll message here now. Like, and then I'll message them. So I'll usually ask, or I'll tell them that I'll connect them with someone who can provide more information because we know a little bit about brevity and the packages and offers. We have an idea, but we don't know a lot of specifics, or I don't always know the right questions to ask. So I'll usually initially tell them I'll connect them with somebody, a salesperson. I won't say salesperson. And then I'll just ask for their contact information. And if they start acting like they don't want to give you much information, you can start asking What system are you currently using? How many agents are on your team? Just introductory questions like that. And I'll always sign off with my name so they know I'm a real person and I'm not a robot. If someone shared our video, I'll usually like that too, as brevity. Now we're going to look at the HubSpot sales inbox in HubSpot. So if you go to Conversations, Inbox, and then up here, you want to click on Sales. So we're doing this to make sure that leads get put into our system correctly. And so when someone responds to sales@brevity.com, this is the way that we make sure they get put into the system, or we get rid of spam. So emails like this, we can just automatically close out because it's ads. Close that out. And if someone requests a webinar recording, what you can do is if they're asking for a future webinar, if there's going to be a recording, you can respond and say there will be. If they're asking for a previous recording, you can find that and send it to them. When they ask to receive the recording, make sure that they register for the webinar because that's how we get them on the right list. Don't close those emails out yet because if they respond, that'll create confusion. If someone requests information like this, see if they're in our system or not. This person is currently a customer and they might want to upgrade, so what you should do is assign the conversation to Tim, so that way he can see this. This person is not in our system yet, but they're requesting more information, and so make sure their first name and their last name are correct. Check their from email, make sure that's correct, because that's how contacts are created, is based around emails. Brevity Discovery Calls Rep and Brevity Sales Owner will be automatically assigned when you assign somebody as a lead new for Brevity Lifecycle Stage and Brevity Lead Status. And then you want to mark them as brand Brevity Yes. So when you do this, it'll create contact and it will put them into a workflow and assign them sales reps. So you can do all of that, hit save, and then keep moving down. With the marketing inbox, this comes in from Facebook, and so check the conversations that are going on and see if you need to make new contacts out of them. If you don't, you can just close out the conversation. So I'm going to show you how to update the paid leads dashboard for the sales team. Now this shows us how many leads we were able to get in and how much we spent and the cost per lead for the sales team. So in Google Ads, you're going to select the last week, Monday through Sunday, and then it helps if you type in the titles the same way that you see on Google, because then all the information stays the same. These are all search campaigns, so write that, and then the daily budget, you're going to fill that in. Usually it's going to stay the same, but we updated them recently, so that's why I'm changing them right now. And those add up. And the cost, you're going to look at the cost column and fill in those numbers. And I'm not going to change very many numbers because I'm using an example sheet of last week's data, so I already filled this in, so it's the same, but usually you're going to adjust all of these. Budget utilization, that's a function, so you don't actually have to type anything in there, just look at the numbers. And then you're going to look at clicks, and so that's in its own column, and you're going to type those numbers in. And cost per click, that's also a function, so you don't have to worry about changing that, just pay attention to the numbers. Then you're going to look at conversions and type those in, and that's the amount of people that clicked on one of our paid ads and filled out the form on the landing page successfully and became a lead, so those are those numbers. And cost per conversion, that's also a function. Should shoot for those to be under $100. And I'm going to remove this remarketing display campaign because we ended that, so we don't actually need that. So you might have to adjust the functions a little bit if you ever do something like that, but it's easy to do. So on Facebook ads, also change the dates to be the last week, Monday through Sunday. And lead forms, that's the first one that's active. And you're going to look at daily budget, that's on this side of the dashboard. And then you're going to look at cost, which is on this, it's called amount spent, so write that. Budget utilization, that's also a formula. Clicks, you're going to look at link clicks, type that in. Cost per click, that's a function. Conversions, it's called results on Facebook, so look for that number. And then cost per acquisition, that's also a function. I'm going to adjust these formulas below to be updated since we took out that campaign. Alright, so you see this weird column that's called in HubSpot, currently unaccounted for. If you look at this dashboard, there's yesterday's, last week's, and this month's paid leads and retargeting. So you're going to add those two numbers together for last week and type that in the bottom column. So 144 plus 6 is 150. And then the red number is the difference between the conversions that we can account for and the conversions that we can't. Because, for instance, a chatbot might grab somebody, and so that's not counted as a conversion on that page. You go to the dynamic charts page and get your dates, so the November 11th through 17th, and you're going to hit equals, and then go to the sheet that you were just working on and click on the cost for last week. You're going to do the same with conversions. And then you're going to do the same with cost per acquisition. If you pull those percentages down, it tells you the difference between the percent difference between 2 weeks ago and last week, so you know if you improved or didn't improve. And then for these, you're going to want to click on go to contacts. Then you're going to put the contacts in order of the real estate brand they're from, and count the number that are Keller Williams, and then count the number that are known that are not Keller Williams. Figure out that percent. It's just an estimate. It's not very scientific at all. But that gives you a good idea of the percent that are KW agents and the percent that are not KW agents that we were able to acquire last week. So that's how you get all these numbers into the cells. As you add numbers in, these dynamic charts will change, and so you see the conversions, we want to keep going up, and the cost per acquisition, you want to keep going down. And if you're under $100 per lead, that's really good. And so right now we've been doing pretty well. But yeah, we want to keep these lines going in this direction. Cost per week, that'll fluctuate depending on the time of year and if people want to open up our budget more or pull back. We do a few different pieces of email marketing every week. I'll just kind of show you an overview of the email interface in HubSpot. So we do feature releases and then webinar invites and follow-up, and so that's a majority of what we do from email. And so a feature release, I'll just show you what the email looks like when you receive it. So it's kind of like a newsletter. Any of the new features that were created over the week and released on Facebook through Josiah will appear here. So Brivity Dialer was last week. And then down here, here's a video from our YouTube channel that Dave made for BKTO YouTube, and it's pointing at this event that our company is throwing. And so you can register through here. So it's an announcement for features, an announcement for an event, and then here's just the footer. It's pretty generic. And so every week I just clone the feature release from the week before. I send it out as a regular email, because the difference between regular and automated is that regular is a one-shot email, and then automated means that you're going to be putting it into a workflow where after something happens, it'll be sending it out regularly. So you can change the date up here, and this is pretty straightforward. It's drag and drop, so when you click into each one of these things, you can do alt text, so just be aware of that there might be alt text on an image that you upload. And then you can add a link to it as well. You need to make sure that you update the links that are behind all the pictures, because it's easy to forget that. And then here's a text box. You can drag that around. These lines, you can adjust a lot of the specs with the lines, and so I just try to copy and replicate as many of things as I can so it stays consistent, because it's easy to lose the color of the line or the width, and then it starts to look funky. And the buttons can link to pages within HubSpot or URLs. It can kind of be anything. If you want to upload a document, you have to do that through Files and Templates. If you go to Files, you can upload documents here. And then to upload them into emails, you should do a button or something like that, and link to a file download, and then you can find it within there. So those are feature releases that you're going to do each week. If there aren't any obvious feature releases, you should ask Mikey about events that are coming up that you want to shout out, and you'll start to sort of understand the events and the timelines that she'll want.
Oh my god, I did this all for nothing. Oh no, this is no.
And this is an example of a Brivity webinar or a forward coaching. This is an example of a forward coaching webinar invite. And so you can see that the logo up here is different because it's a different brand that was putting on the webinar. The colors are a little bit different for the different branding of a different company. And then down here, there's all these pieces that are a little bit different. So yeah. Under settings, you can adjust the from name. Usually forward coaching, Taylor wants them to come from Debbie to Grow. For our webinars, usually they're from Team Brivity. From address, you can also change that. Usually it comes from Debbie@forwardcoaching.com, or it might come from sales@info.brivity.com. You should be checking with the host or Mikey about where our email should be coming from, depending on what the email is. Change the subject line, change the preview text, and then always send yourself test emails. You can send as many as you want, but that way you can just get a visual representation of what you're sending out. So because it's easy to miss something. And when you receive your test email, you should click through every single image and every single link just to make sure it points to the right direction. So we're going to walk through how to set up a webinar, and it's a little bit long, so we'll stumble through this together. Okay, so when you first are told that there's going to be a webinar, you need to ask for a certain amount of information. So the host, it's usually Bob Stewart, but it might be Debbie DeGroat or Ben Kinney. So make sure you get the host, and then there's the date and the time. That's important to know. Make sure you specify if it's PST or MST. Usually it's specific time, but you need to make sure you write that on the event or the graphics or whatever you're doing. Then there's a title, and then the copy that usually the host gives you, or you have to kind of create from what the host tells you. So usually it's a description and then a few bullet points kind of outlining what the webinar is going to be about. So as soon as you're given all of that, you have to go to the webinar host. So usually it's GoToWebinar or Zoom. I'll show you GoToWebinar, but there's certain, I'll write instructions for both, but I'll just show you one. So you schedule a webinar, and then you write all the information that you need in there and copy the description. Go to the design team Trello that Josiah will give you access to, and usually you just go to a past webinar and copy it over to their inbox, design team inbox, and give it a title if that makes sense. So this is testing, sure. So then over here, where you just copied it over, delete all the attachments from previous webinars. And so you can see here there's all the different versions of the same couple graphics that the designer makes for you, because these are all the different platforms that you're going to be advertising on for this webinar. And so follow the same format every time just so it's clear and easy to understand. So you write your name and then the details and specs, which I just wrote in checklist because the designer and I kind of created this checklist instead of doing a separate request for every single graphic, which is what you used to do. And then you write the title, the host, and the time specifically, how you want it read, and then write what it's branded for. So if it's a Brivity webinar, there's certain colors and logos that you use. If it's a forward coaching webinar, there's certain colors and logos that you use. So make sure you specify that. And then I just wrote headshots in black and white, because that's what I wanted for this one. And the one previous, we did headshots in color, so I just wanted to specify that. So then, when you're done with that, I usually comment to Sonia, who's the VA for the design team, something just like, hey, this is here, or I'll Slack her too and sort of say, hey, this is in the design team inbox, can you work on this soon? and she'll respond to me that way. So I know that she's working on it. Because if you just leave it there, sometimes they won't see it or they won't pay attention to it until you bother them about it. So maybe do that immediately. Yeah, so you'll get all these things, and then you want to start making a landing page. And so this is the landing page for signups for the webinars, and I'll show you how to get there. So from HubSpot, click Marketing, Website, Landing Pages. And then it's easiest if you just copy or clone a previous landing page. So this one is 5 Simple Things webinar, so just hit clone and give it the new title and take off the clone on the end. I'm not going to actually do this because I don't want to mess anything up. So 5 Simple Things webinar, and then it's not going to be published yet, so you can go into editor. And so you'll just be replacing all of the different elements of this landing page to be for the updated webinar. So this one's the 5 Simple Things webinar, so you can click on this, hit replace, upload the new landing page content that you get from the design in Trello, and you're going to replace that there. Then you're going to switch out this copy for the new copy, and then with this form right here, you're going to go over here to this and go edit. And then actions, clone form. So you're going to clone the form, and it's going to look the exact same, but you'll want to make sure that you change the source. It's a hidden field, so they won't be able to see this, but when their contact comes through off of this form, the source will have the specific webinar that they came in from. So this one's 5 Simple Things webinar. You might change it to 7 calls to action webinar, or based on the title, you give it a short version. And I try to keep the short version consistent across everything that I do. So the long version is 5 Simple Things you can do now for more deals, but then universally it is 5 Simple Things. And then make sure this hidden field is correct. So this one's brand brevity. Select checkbox by default. Yes. So sometimes it might be brand forward coaching. You want to select checkbox for default, but this tells you what brand they came in interested in when they became a contact. Yeah, then you're going to hit update form. I'm not going to do that right now, but you can usually hit update form, and then if you update the form, you're going to want to update the page or publish it if you haven't published it yet. So make sure you're always editing or updating and publishing. If you just hit save, that won't actually make your changes live. So that's a really important thing to remember. Make sure you update and publish. Don't just save, because most of the time it'll auto-save. Down here, there's these speaker blocks that HubSpot created. On some of the forward coaching ones, it's just an image and a text box. It's not actually these special blocks. You can go edit, and then you can replace the image right here and the description right there. Yeah, so then make sure you hit publish or update, and that makes this form live. For GoToWebinar, if we're using that as our platform, so if this is the platform that we're using, you're going to click on the form, and then go down here to GoToWebinar registration, select a webinar, and then the webinar that you created in GoToWebinar should appear when you type this in. This webinar specifically is in Zoom, which I think we're switching away from, so this is a little bit different, but you'll do that, and then that way when they fill out this form on the HubSpot landing page, it'll automatically register them on the GoToWebinar side of things, so there's less of a workaround. So after you have your landing page set up, you're going to want to fill out this editorial calendar, which gives you a way to look at all of the content and the specs and what you need in one place. So what I always do is I take this one, I just copy it so I can fill it in later. I bring it down to the bottom. I just insert it here, just that way we can keep track of it and remember it. I turn it red so it's not mistaken that it's the current one. And then I'll update all the information. So I'm not going to update this information because it's current, but yeah, so you're going to change it to webinar 11, and then the new date, and the new time, the short title, and the hosts. These can all stay the same because these are just reminders for you for the pixels if design needs clarification about how big something needs to be. The URL, that's going to be the URL that you create on your landing page. So you're going to want to go to settings, and then you're going to edit this URL. So For forward coaching webinars, you're going to do info.forwardcoaching.com. For Brivity webinars, it's webinar.brivity.com. And change this content slug to the short title that you came up with earlier. And you click update. And then you're going to take this full URL and stick it right here, just so it's easy to see and for other people to find. Then you just start inputting the information that you do now. So the landing page is really easy to start filling out. And then the email, you're going to take the description, the long description that the host gives you, and turn it into an email format. So that's what I did here. And these are the subject lines that we're trying. And then in the last chance email, that's usually the third email that goes out to people a couple hours before the webinar starts. So just a shorter version of the full email. Facebook ads, you're going to write, for instance, with this webinar, you just write different things, and this is where you put the headlines, and it's just a way for you to see all the information in one place, and the different ways that you're posting about it on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. This makes it easier to post on social media later. So once the design is done, you're going to download all the different versions of the design, and then you're going to go to Marketing, Social, then create social post. And so from here you can say Facebook, and then you can copy over the Facebook content, stick it here, and then you can upload the Facebook image that design created for you, and then you should schedule it. So usually I do it at the same time that the invite email, the first one, is sent out, which we'll talk about that later. And then I'll do another Facebook version, so you can see here that there's LinkedIn, which is just this, but then there's another LinkedIn down here. It's a little bit simpler and it's a little bit different, but it's the same idea. So I'll usually use one of those for the initial post, inviting people to sign up and to register, but then I'll do something like this for the last chance. You're not posting the same thing twice. Down here you can see it says Active Rain Advertising Specs Sheet. That's this tab right here. So you click on that, and this is a template for you to remember the character counts that they need on Active Rain. But this part isn't that difficult. You're not coming up with that much content. You're just describing things in a different way and posting the URLs. So it's easy for our contact at Active Rain to see. So you're going to copy this entire table, and then go to your email. You're going to email Damien@activerain.com. Subject line, I usually just do webinar 10 content. And then you're going to paste the entire table right here. So then you're going to go to your MailChimp for BKTO. It's under Mikey's name. And you're going to click on Brand, then go to Templates. And then you can see these two templates right here are AR, that stands for Active Rain, Webinar Invite, and then Active Rain, Webinar Invite, Last Chance with bios. So these are the two that you're going to want to edit. So open them into new tabs. And then you're going to see the same email that you did the last time. So this is for a webinar called Overcoming 5 Common Real Estate Objections. So you're just going to replace all these elements with your new copy for the email body, and then your new graphics and the new hosts. Just turn this into the email that you want to send out. And then you're going to do the same thing for the last chance email, so it's the same thing, just a little shorter. And then from this screen, make sure it's the right email, or test them and send them to get approved. And then you click export as HTML for both of them. And you're just turning it into an HTML because from Active Rain they only send out HTMLs, they don't send out emails the same way that we do from HubSpot. So yeah, that's what it should look like. And then in that email to Damien@activerain.com, you're gonna include the HTML files. The last and biggest part of setting up webinars is setting up the email sequences to invite people to them, and then the follow-up sequences as well. So I created this outline so it's a little bit easier to see. So if we're doing the webinar on Zoom, we have the landing page that we talked about first, and so this form is called something like 5 Simple Things webinar. And so the first workflow we need is for Zoom registration, if we're doing a Zoom webinar. So the enrollment trigger has filled out for the 5 Simple Things webinar registration on any page. So when you're going to click on the enrollment trigger, and it's going to ask you, we'll delete this for now, it's going to ask you how do you want to trigger the workflow. And so sometimes you'll click form submissions, find the form that you want, contact fill the format on any page. Say any page, it's just more of a catch-all just in case something happens. Then click apply filter and save. And then you're going to usually want to save and enroll the existing contacts. And then for Zoom, you're going to make the consequence of the trigger. You're going to click add contact to Zoom webinar, and you identify the webinar through this webinar ID right here, which you can find on your specific webinar on Zoom. So that's the first workflow that you need. The second workflow is the invite sequence A. And so I'll just show you on this diagram because it's really confusing if you look on the example that I showed. But usually you can just clone a previous workflow and change everything from there. But this might be easier to help you understand. So I usually call it A because there's an A and a B, and this just kind of keeps it in order without being too wordy. And so you're going to send this to the target audience. And so you're going to want to work with Grant and Mikey about what the target audience is, because based on what the host wants and who the host wants to attend this, you're going to use different criteria. So for now, I'll just say send to target audience. And then you're going to center the workflow around a date. And when you're setting up the workflow, it's going to ask you what you want the date to be. So you're going to want to center the workflow around the date of the webinar. So this is 4 or 5 Simple Things. It's centered around November 27th because that was the date of the webinar. And so the first action, it's going to ask you when do you want to do the first action. And so we wanted this to happen 5 days before the webinar date at a specific time. So do this action on the 20th at 12:45. So it's going to phrase it as 7 days before November 27th because that's the date that you specified at the beginning. And then you're going to send the first webinar invite email, and that's the email that we talked about earlier. And then right below that, it's going to ask you when you want to do the next action. So then we did 2 days before the webinar date at a specific time. And below that, you're going to do an if-then branch for marketing email activity. And there's an option for received invite 1 but didn't open it. If that's a no, they're done with the workflow because that means that they received the email, they opened it, but they didn't want to register for it. So we don't want to send them another email because then it can get flagged as spam. But if they received the email and didn't open it, it might have gotten buried in their inbox. So we want to send them another one. So if this is a yes, you want to do the next action 2 days before the webinar date at a specific time. It'll force you to do it 15 minutes after this time. So just do it as close to the hour as you can. And you want to send webinar invite 2. And even though it might be the same email as webinar invite 1, we need to send it as a number 2 so that way you can do a different subject line. And also you can look at stats for open rates of the first invite versus the second invite. So then below that, it's going to ask you when you want to do the next action. Usually this is the last chance email, so I'll do it on the webinar date at 6:45 a.m. because the webinars are usually at 10 or later. So that way they'll see it when they come in the morning. And so then below that, we do another if-then branch for received invite 2 but didn't open it. No, they're done. Yes, you're going to want to send invite 3. And these workflows, they look really complicated, but once you start to understand the logic of it, it starts to make more sense. So just look over it a few times, read it out loud to yourself to make sure that the invites that you're checking in this if then branches match up with the invites that are being sent afterward, because that can get kind of confusing and you can get backwards. For the follow-up sequence, that's I label it with a B on the end. And so this should be the webinar date. And you want to do the first action on the webinar date 30 minutes after the webinar is supposed to end. So if the webinar goes from 11 to 12, make the first action happen at 12:30. This gives Zoom or GoToWebinar or whatever we're using a chance to talk to HubSpot and transfer the data so people are being transferred correctly and labeled the correct things. So 30 minutes after the webinar ends, you're going to send an email all registrants. So this is kind of like same idea as the invite email, but this time it's going to say something like, thank you for registering for the webinar. The recording will be sent to your inbox very soon. If you want to set up an appointment with a salesperson, you can. And so all of the all registrants emails are going to be in HubSpot still, so you can copy those and copy the format and what it's asking. And the reason why we ask for you to write the recording will be coming very soon is because you're going to start getting harassed really quickly with people asking for the webinar, saying that they missed it and they wanted to know if there's a recording. So we send that out. It mitigates some of that, and you have less people asking you for the webinar recording before it's ready. So then after the email is sent, you're going to want to set a contact property brevity lead status to call list. So in this one right here, you can see after this is sent, you're going to set contact property brevity lead status to call list, and then you're going to set contact property brevity lifecycle stage to lead. So this makes the leads label the correct things. And then you're going to rotate the leads to the sales team, and this is what the bubble looks like when you're done filling that out. And then you're going to rotate the leads to the discovery call reps. And then you're going to add to a specific list for the webinar. So that way these people, the sales owner and the call reps, can look at this specific list called like 5 Simple Things Webinar Registrants. And they can pull out the leads that are assigned to them from this list specifically. And the last email that you're going to be sending out for a webinar is after the recording is done. And this is just going to be a one-off email. It doesn't need a workflow because you're just sending one email. And it's going to follow a similar format as the all registrants email, in the fact that it's going to ask for you to set up an appointment with the sales rep at the end, but it's going to be phrased a little bit more like, thanks for registering again, here's the recording of the webinar. And then maybe summarize the webinar a little bit and say, if you want to talk more about this with the Brevity Discovery Call Rep, you should schedule an appointment here with a button that has a link. And this is always a little bit different, so you should talk to the host and Mikey and Grant about the expectations for the webinar, just to make sure you're communicating the right things, that the end goal is correct with what the intention of the webinar is. So to create a webinar on GoToWebinar, you click on this button right here, Schedule a Webinar, and then you can choose a past webinar to copy to get all the information transferred over just in case there's small things that you miss. So I'm going to copy Keep Your Brand at the top of Google search. So from here you can add your new title, write in your new description, and then I never click on one of these, so you can leave that blank. This one occurs one session, but you might do recurring for other webinars. You want to choose the start date, the start time. From here you can include Bob Stewart, yourself if you want to, Mikey. Make sure that there's a confirmation email that's sent with the join link. The reminder email, you can edit that with the subject line. You don't need any follow-up emails on GoToWebinar because that's all going to be done through HubSpot. So you're done on the GoToWebinar side now. You're going to want to go into HubSpot and look at the landing page that you're dealing with.
Oh, I saw the screw.
It was in that.
And so from here, you can click on the form. And then down here, there's an option for GoToWebinar registration. That's how clean HubSpot and GoToWebinar work together. And so you choose the webinar, which I chose December 17th. So usually it'll have the title right here. You can click on the webinar that you want it to register people for. And then you don't need to worry about clicking any of these because you're going to manually add them to the workflows later. They don't need to be added to the workflow from this screen. Then hit apply. So this action is super simple. If they fill out this form, they get added to the GoToWebinar as registrants for the specific webinar. Super easy. The integration for GoToWebinar and HubSpot is even better because for the follow-up, the enrollment trigger can be has registered for, and then you can click on this GoToWebinar criteria, and you can choose the specific webinar from GoToWebinar. And then down here, for the follow-up, you're gonna wanna stretch it out a little bit past when the webinar is gonna be over. So GoToWebinar has the chance to talk to HubSpot, so clients will be labeled correctly, especially if they're going through an if-then branch, because you can do if-then, GoToWebinar has attended the specific webinar. And if yes, they can go down this path. If no, they can go down this path. But those integrations are already built in.